you guys. In today's video, I am going to talk about something I love to do, which is to break the rules. Let's jump right in and talk about some of the watercolor rules I love to break. Okay, the first watercolor rule that I love to break is the rule that you should paint from light to dark. Now with watercolor painting, it's true, you have to save your whites. The white in watercolor painting is actually the white of the paper. It is not Chinese white. It is not gouache. No, don't do that. Now, when you're adding the jewelry, which I've talked about in a lot of my videos, you can use gouache to add jewelry like little whiskers or the glint in the eye if you're painting a cat, or the sea foam in a painting. You can use it, but a far more effective way to create whites in your painting is by using the white of the paper. And so that is why it's so important in watercolor painting to paint from light to dark in general, because you want to make sure that you're painting your lights first, so you keep track of where they are. And also, when you paint a dark in watercolor, you can't paint over it. Like if you paint a black in acrylic and then you paint white over it, it's very effective. But you cannot go in and paint a white over a dark color in watercolor painting. It just doesn't work. But I actually do use this method a lot, of painting over my darks with a lighter glaze. And the reason why I do that is because it softens a dark color at its edges. So for example, let me show you this painting that I did recently of this Siamese cat. Now he had a dark chin, and I wanted to soften the edge along here a little bit. So it was as dark as you could possibly get. So when you do break this rule, you have to remember to let all your paint completely dry before you paint over it again with a watery glaze of lighter color. And what you might want to do is to paint a glaze over your dark area, so at the boundaries you do see the color that you just painted, but where it's dark you're not going to see the color that you put down, but it will soften the edges of the dark edge up against the lighter area. So I will show you this in my Siamese cat painting that I did recently, where I did paint this part of his chin and his cheeks first, and then I went back over it later with a lighter glaze to put in the light browns up in this area, up in his forehead area, and to give more shape to his chin. So I broke the rule of painting light to dark in this painting, in this part of the painting, because I added the medium values to this cat's face after I got in the really dark values. And it served the purpose of softening the edges just a little bit, so that it didn't look, so my dark area didn't look like I had pasted it on. The second watercolor rule I love to break is using black paint. I use black paint quite a bit. Do you know why? Do you want to see my muse and my inspiration for using black paint? I'll show you. It just so happens she's sitting right here at my feet, and I paint, this is Sadie, I paint Sadie a lot. And as you can see, she is a black cat. And sometimes I mix my paints to create a black, and other times I use lamp black, because the thing I like about lamp black is it granulates really pretty, it erases really nice, and you can mix colors into it to create a more interesting black. So it doesn't have to be a completely flat black color if you mix it with other paints. So let me show you an example. In this painting, I used lamp black plus moon glow, and the moon glow mixed with the lamp black made quite a lovely black, I think. I don't think that looks flat. Now the thing you want to remember is, if you paint with lamp black, you don't want to paint something completely black in a large area. You want to have lighter and darker areas in your black. So for example, if you look at this closely, like in her tail, there are really dark areas in the lamp black, and then lighter areas where I mixed more water to create a lighter gray color mixed in with the dark areas. So yes, it's true, you don't want big blob areas of flat lamp black or black paint. And a couple things you can do is, one, mix another color into your black. I like lamp black. Or you can mix more water and make some parts of the black lighter and some parts of the black darker. On the other hand, you can mix your blacks. My favorite mix for black is burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, and that's what I did in this painting. You can see how there's a lot more variety of colors in the blacks, and it does make it more interesting. So in general, you do want to try to make your blacks not look like flat black blobs or pasted on areas. You want them to have a lot of variety and movement in them, which usually means some lighter, slightly lighter and slightly darker areas. Another rule I like to break is you should trace. And this is a general art rule that is out there. I think a lot of beginners especially, they're still romanticizing art and artists like we're magicians, evil geniuses maybe. In my case, since I break so many rules, I must be an evil genius, right? But no, we're just humans, and we've just learned skills that we need to create beautiful paintings. And one of the tools that we artists use, especially professional working artists, and you see these big international watercolor competitions with really complex subjects, you better believe those paintings were from transfers or tracings, or the artist projected the image onto the watercolor paper, because the subjects can get so complex that you cannot paint something just by drawing it when something gets that complex. So I personally learned this trick from an article in a watercolor magazine about using transferring. That's what we artists use to make it more palatable. It's transferring, it's not tracing, but it's basically tracing, okay? Yeah. So what that means is you trace your image and you transfer it onto your watercolor paper. And this cuts down on drawing time. This makes sure you get your drawing accurate, and it doesn't look so wonky donkey. And yes, you still need a lot of drawing skills, because once you cover up that initial transfer, then after that, you're going to have to use your drawing skills to paint the rest of the painting. So once that's covered up, you can't see it anyway, and then you have to fall back on your drawing skills. So you do need to continue to develop your drawing skills. But I think a lot of beginners might get a little frustrated when they're trying to do a painting and it just looks so wonky because their drawing is way off. And they don't want to cheat by tracing, but professional artists do it, and there's a reason why. It's because it just is another tool to help your painting come out looking beautiful and keeping you on track. And after you get the initial transfer down, like I said, you will have to rely heavily on your drawing skills. Okay, another rule that I love to break is you should stretch your watercolor paper. I don't even know what they're talking about, because yes, watercolor will buckle and it's annoying, and I find that even if you stretch it and then tape it down, it's gonna buckle again once it gets wet. So the way to resolve that issue is to get it a little moist on the back and then let it sit overnight between two heavy books or something like that to get it perfectly flat, if that's important for you, or if it buckled a lot. And also it's important to use good watercolor paper that doesn't buckle as much. But stretching your paper, I've never done that. All I do is I take a fresh piece of dry paper, I tape it down to one of my art boards, and away we go. So I don't use any kind of stretching, pre-wetting and then letting it dry. I don't do that. That is a rule I've broken since day one. Okay, another rule in watercolor is you can't erase in watercolor. You have to get it right the first time, because you're not going to be able to erase, and watercolor is not fixable. You guys, come on. Watercolor is so fixable, and you just have to know the tricks to fix a watercolor so that you can erase. Now, that is another whole video. There are a few things you need to do if you want to be able to erase your painting. One, do not use staining colors. Don't use phthalo blue, don't use phthalo green, don't use alizarin crimson. There's a whole long list of colors that don't erase well, but those are the 3 most non-erasable paints I've come across. So just know that if you want to be able to fix your painting, use paint that is more friendly to being erased, which include burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, cobalt blue. Quinacridones have been erasing well for me. Naphthol red has been fine. That's the trick, is finding a red that will erase. A lot of the tricks that I use rely on kind of an erasing technique, which is a scrubbing technique where I scrub my edges to soften them. And so I have to use paint colors that erase well, that are non-staining. So get to know your paints. Use handprint.com where you can research your paint colors and see which colors are staining or non-staining, or just join my Patreon and learn from me what colors I use in my palette, and then you don't have to do all that research. You can erase watercolor. You can use a scrubber. You can use a magic eraser. Another thing you can do is paint over it with gouache. And there's also a thing called watercolor ground. Okay, you guys, those were the top rules that I love to break. What are some watercolor rules that you know of that you like to break? I would love to hear about them in the comments, and I just love to hear from you in general. If you watched this video, give me a like and leave me a comment and let me know, hey, I was here. You don't even have to say anything beyond that. But all right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this was helpful, and be sure to subscribe. I upload a new video every week. If you want to learn from me more in depth, go check out my Patreon, and I will see you guys next week. Do you want to say bye-bye, kitty? Ow! I love you though, kitty. Bye, you guys.